name is Alicia Garcia, and I'm 20 years old. Was it controlled demolition?
I'm Terry McAllister. I work at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. NIST conducted a very extensive study.
Today is April the 18th, 2002. My name is Donald Kramer, and I will be taking walkthroughs.
We had 200 technical experts. Just to give you an idea of how carefully we considered all the information that was available, we reviewed tens of thousands of documents. We interviewed more than 1,000 people. We reviewed 7,000 segments of video footage that totaled 150 hours of video, and 7,000 photographs from over 185 photographers. And we recovered 236 pieces of steel from the debris following the collapse from the towers. So the fires did not melt the steel. Steel has to get extremely hot before it melts. It does get softened, though.
Why did the Twin Towers crumble the way they did? How did they remain standing for so long? One of the innovations was making the external walls the primary support for the towers. These outer columns, tied closer together than was normal at the time, could withstand the impact of a Boeing 707. Though the plane would destroy some of the columns, the building would still remain standing.
If you look at the construction of the World Trade Center towers and you look at the photos of them, they had very closely spaced exterior columns. And when the aircraft hit the buildings, it largely created a massive amount of debris and fuel being spread across the floors that were impacted. And what this did, it not only spread fuel to start fires much more broadly than you would typically in a building fire, but it also stripped off what we call the fire protection materials on the steel columns. And when that got stripped away, that increased the ability of the steel to be exposed to heat, so it softened. And what that means is as it became heated, it couldn't carry as much load as it could when it was cooler.
The World Trade Center towers were attacked with approximately 185 tons of aircraft, carrying 75 tons of jet fuel. Though the structures seemed to withstand the impact, the explosions and the subsequent heat from the burning jet fuel were beyond its limits. The nearly 2,000-degree temperature would eventually take its toll.
All the failure occurred at the aircraft damage level and above. And once that tipped a little bit and started to come down, then the rest of the building failed. And some people questioned, oh, I saw puffs of smoke or something as the building was collapsing. Well, think about it. As each floor is starting to collapse down, all the drywall and all the things that are in each floor level is getting pushed out sideways. If you understand what's required to do controlled demolition, what you'll see is you have to go around each column, the vertical members that are holding the building up, and very carefully prepare them. You have to pull everything away. You've got to sometimes make cuts into the members, and you've got to put materials and explosives next to them. You've got to do all this on a number of the columns with nobody noticing, with nobody being aware. And these buildings were occupied and under surveillance and security 24/7. So one, the chance of that happening, was just unrealistic. And two, there's absolutely no evidence that anything like that took place.
Adam Saavedra, I am 22 years old. How does millennials and older generations, how does that collective trauma transition into Gen Z?
Hi, I'm Molly Castello, and I'm a filmmaker and writer and mental health practitioner.
For 3 days now, there has been a constant stream of emotion here on the sidewalks right in front of the station house. Neighbors, friends, strangers, they all feel an attachment that is almost surreal.
When you can't work through or mourn the trauma, whether it's an individual trauma or the experience of a group trauma, that's when it's frequently passed on. We can think about 9/11 as in the trauma endured by the Millennials, and think about how it's transmitted to the Generation Z through stories and through ways that these young people hear about the trauma, and the way that it's also developed in their minds, in their imaginations, and in their fears.
2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center.
And there were some people hurt. All the debris was hitting people that were running up south to north.
The glass blew out and threw me onto the sidewalk, and I couldn't see for 20 seconds.
And all this gets mixed up together in an individual, and they have incorporated a kind of idea and experience of that trauma themselves.
And although we can never unsee what happened here, we can also see that children who lost their parents have grown into young adults, grandchildren have been born, and good works and public service have taken root to honor those we loved and lost.
Some probably have worked to mourn those losses and that traumatic history that they inherited through, art, typically through memorials, through other kinds of grieving processes that are shared in a community.